Welcome back to our day 3 of factoring. So a couple things I just want you to know. When we get to this section, which is after this first page, but when we get to this section, when they put this coefficient out front, it's really kind of a puzzle, okay? So there's not a great formula or anything I can give you for some of these. You really have to, one, know your multiples, and then two, you got to test your outers and your inners, okay? The first row here is actually some of the same ones that we did yesterday. So if you notice in the first row, the last symbol always ends in a plus sign, and that's kind of where we ended yesterday. So kind of as a warm-up, why don't you try these first three? So go ahead and pause the video here and try them. All right, hopefully you tried them. If you're still a little unsure, maybe go through the first one with me, and then after I'm done with the first one, pause the video and you can do the second one. So remember, we're going to do 2 parentheses. We're going to do W times W because that's how we get W squared. Because this is a plus sign, our symbols are going to be the same, and when we look back, they're both subtraction signs. Now 3 is a prime number, so the only thing that multiplies to get 3 is 3 and 1. And remember, it doesn't matter which parenthesis you put it in. So when we check the outer, we get a -3, and when we check the inner, I was jumping ahead. When we do the outer, we get a -1, and when we do the inner, we get a -3. So that's where our -4 is coming from. So then this would be our answer, okay? So if you need to, you can quick pause it here and try the other two. All right, number 2. We've got y times y. Because this is a plus, we look back, that means they're both addition signs. We got some different options for 40, but the only one that's going to add to get a 13 would be 8 and 5. If you try to use any other combination of 40, like let's say you try to use 2 and 20, I don't disagree that that's not 40, but it's not going to get you to a 13. So this is the combination you would want to use. On number 3, we're going to go with x times x. And because this is a plus sign, when we look back, they're both subtractions. And then again, there's a couple options for 24. My first instinct when I tried 24 was actually 6 times 4. But if I were to put a 6 and a 4 here, that's going to give me a -4 and a -6. That's not 14. So even as a teacher, my first instincts was to use 6 and 4. But I actually want to use 12 and 2. Because that'll give me a -2x and a -12, and that gives me the -14. So sometimes you got to be really careful with this ending number when it's got more options or it's got more combinations or more multiples to use. Now, in this next row, you're going to notice that all of the last signs are a subtraction. So I just want you to think about this for a second. When we are doing the 2 binomials, okay, so in this first one, we had both subtractions. Well, when we multiply 3 times 1, when we do our last, a negative times a negative is a positive. In number 2, we had 2 plus signs. So when we do 8 and 5, a positive times a positive would be a positive 40. So do you see how when your symbols are the same, you're going to get a plus? But what if your symbols were different? So we'll just use the same number 1. What if we would have had a +3 and a -1? When we multiply those together, we get a -3. Now let me go ahead and put the variable out front. When we work this out, if we do, so the first won't matter, that's just going to be W times W. But when we do the outer, that's a -1W. And when we do the inner, that's a positive 3W. And when we put these together, that's a 2W. Okay? We still get a negative at the end because we have alternating signs, but I want you to look at this combination. What happens instead of doing the +3, what if I would have put it with a -3, and then instead of doing a -1, I would put a +1. So essentially what I've done is I've just switched the symbols. Instead of being plus minus, I did minus plus. So everything else is the same, I just switched my symbols. Now, the first one's not going to be affected because they don't have any symbols out front, so just W times W. When I do the outer, I get a plus 1. When I do the inner, I get a minus 3w. And when I do the last, I still get a negative 3. But look at my middle term now. Do you see how my middle term used to be a positive and now it's a negative? The first term and the last term are the same, but it's that middle term, that symbol is changing. So when your last symbol here is a subtraction, you know your signs in the parentheses are going to alternate. It ultimately doesn't matter which symbol you put first, so I could put the subtraction sign first. What is actually going to matter is what goes with the subtraction sign and what goes with the addition sign. So that's more important. Now, the b squared isn't going to change because if you look to the left of your letter, your variable, it doesn't have a symbol out front, so that's not going to make a difference. All right, let's take a look at the combinations of 54. Obviously, I don't think it's going to be 1 times 54 because that's not going to get me to a 3. So basically what you want to say to yourself is what multiplies together that is going to subtract to get 3. So what numbers would multiply to 54 that subtract to get 3? And you should be saying 9 times 6. So if I do 9 minus 6, I would get a positive 3. So basically what I want is I want the 9 to be positive and I want the 6 to be negative. So let me just quick check my outers and my inners. That would be a 9b minus 6b. There's the 3b that I'm looking for. So this is the correct answer. Now, if you want to switch this and do b plus 9 and b minus 6, that would be perfectly fine. But you need the plus symbol with the 9. Watch if I put b plus 6 and b minus 9. So if I take the first one and I just switch my symbols, but I keep like the 6 in the first and the 9 in the second. If I switch my symbols, I'm going to get a negative 9b and a positive 6b, which is going to give me a negative 3b, and that's not what I wanted. I wanted a positive 3b. So it does make a difference what symbol goes with each number. So notice the next two are very similar. So why don't you go ahead and pause it and try these two? Okay, hopefully you've paused it. And if we were together in class, I would be asking for some help here, but because I'm all alone, I'm just going to throw down the plus first and the minus second. Now the nice thing is 2 is a prime number. Even though it's even, it's prime. The only option you have is 1 times 2. But because you want this negative in the middle, you can't do 2 minus 1 because that would give you a positive. So you actually need it as 1 minus 2 because that gives you a negative 1. So we want the 1 to be positive and the 2 to be negative. And that will give us the correct middle term. All right, number 6. We've got U, and again, we have alternating signs. And then we have to think of 18. The first combination that came to my mind was 9 times 2. But I can tell you that 9 minus 2 is 7, so that's not going to get me to 3. So I know this one isn't even right. So then I had to think about 6 times 3. And then I thought, ooh, if I do 6 minus 3, I will get positive 3, which is what I want. So I'm going to do a plus 6 and a minus 3. Now again, you can have this come first, but I need to see the minus 3 piece. Okay, if we turn to the next page, there's 3 more at the top for you just to practice. Now, one thing I want you to notice, nope, these ones all have the subtraction. Okay, so just go ahead and pause it here and try these. Remember, we are not having homework in this chapter, so it is important that you're practicing these on your own. We are going to have a quiz at the end, but you need to practice these. All right, number 7, I'm going to go kind of quick here. The answer would have been z minus 8 and z plus 7, because 8 times 7 gets me 56. And if I check, that's a 7z and a negative 8z, so that's a negative 1z. So I know I've done it right. All right, number 8. We've got h, and then we'll do plus and minus. Whoops. Plus and minus. And then we've got this 24 again, which remember, we've already seen on this side. But before we use 12 and 2, now 12 and 2 is not going to get us to this. So like if I were to try 12 times 2, that's going to get me to a 10. That's not what I want. So this time around, you need to use the combination of 6 and 4. And since you want this to be positive, then we need to go 6 minus 4. So I'm going to do 6 and 4 like that. And then again, if you want to check your outers, that's a negative 4h, and that's a positive 6h, so that's a 2h. So I know I've done it right. All right, and then last, sorry, my paper's kind of folding up on me here. I've got f plus, f minus. Sometimes I do the plus first, sometimes I don't. It just doesn't really matter. I'm thinking that this is going to be 8 times 5 because I know if I subtract, I get a 3, but I got to be careful because I want this to be negative. So if I kind of do like a negative 8 plus 5, that will give me a negative 3. So see how I'm kind of using off to the side to like come up with my, like who gets what symbol? Maybe you can do that in your head, but if you can't, you can do it on paper. So I have a negative 8 and then a plus 5. And again, if you want to quick check this, negative 8 and then plus 5, that's going to give us a negative 3. So we know we've done it right. Now, this next section, we're going to have a number out front, okay? If you have a number out front and you can get rid of it, I would do that first. So in number 10, do you notice that all of these numbers are divisible by 5? So if you can divide off that number, that is going to be your best bet. What you want to do is just put it out front. So you're going to do 5, and then you're going to divide it. So divide every piece by 5. Now, this is going to make it significantly easier. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. Look down at like number 17. These numbers are not divisible by 6 or by anything. So these ones are going to be harder. All right, on this one, we're still going to do our 2 binomials. And we can actually kind of just ignore the 5. We just can work with this trinomial right here. So we're going to do S and S. And then think about 10. You only have 2 combinations, but you need to get to an 11. So 5 and 2 is not going to get you to an 11. So I'm thinking it's 10 and 1. The other thing I did know was because this was a plus sign, that means these will be the same. So I knew they were both additions, okay? How about I'll try another one with you and then I'll let you practice. When I'm looking at this, all of these numbers are divisible by 8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull an 8 out front. So if I divide everybody by 8, that's what I would get. Now the 8's just kind of sitting there, but now you want to work with your trinomial. So we're going to do x times x, and again, because my symbol is a plus, when I look back, that means they're both subtractions. And then again, think about 6. 1 and 6 will get me to a 7. 2 and 3 is not going to get me to 7. So I need a 1 and a 6. And because my symbols are the same, I literally can just put them down in whatever order I want. It's when your symbols alternate that you have to be careful of who gets the plus and who gets the minus. But in this case, they both have the same symbol. So why don't you try, I think you can do 12, 13, and 14 because those are all pretty similar. 15 has a different little twist to it. So go ahead and try those 3. Okay, number 12. It should have been pulling out the 2. And then if I do my parentheses, I would get C minus, ooh, hold on, that one has a negative at the end, doesn't it? Okay, so this has a minus at the end, so my signs need to alternate. I'm thinking that this is going to be 9 times 2 because 9 minus 2 will get me 7. But because this is negative, I need the negative with the 9. So do you see how even as a teacher, do you see how I kind of caught myself? My eyes saw this subtraction, so I was about to put both of these as subtractions until I noticed, and then my eyes were like, whoa, you got to have them alternate, okay? So those are things you got to watch for. All right, number 13. 13 is divisible by 4, so I'm going to get a squared plus 2a, oh, that'd be what, minus 35? So I'm already noticing right now, catching myself, that that's a minus. So I'm going to do a plus and I'm going to do a minus. 35, I'm thinking is 5 times 7. But I need this to be a positive. So I really want this as a minus 5 and a plus 7 because that will get me the positive 2. So I need the 7 with the plus and the minus with the 5. Now again, if you put your minus first, then you just need to switch your numbers, okay? All right, number 14, you're going to get rid of this 3. And again, I'm noticing that subtraction there. I like it when it's a plus at the end a little bit better. Okay, so I've got x plus, and I'm going to do x minus, and then 8. I'm really thinking that this is 4 and 2. Because if I try to use 8 and 1, that's going to get me to a 7. That's not what I want. Now again, this is a minus, so it's going to be a minus 4 and a plus 2. So I need the subtraction with the 4 and the plus with the 2. And then I'm done. Now on the rest of these, you're going to notice that they're not divisible by the same number. So on the remaining, 6 of them, they're not divisible, so we can't pull anything out. The one thing I can tell you, though, is in this particular one, at number 15 and on number 16, your first number is negative. So that's a little bit more challenging, okay? So let's actually go, you know what, let's go with number 17 for a quick second because this is positive. When this is positive and they're not divisible, then you just have to do the puzzle. You got to figure out what you're going to put down here to get your FOIL to work. Now, the nice thing is this is prime. So the only option you have is 1 times 1. This is a plus sign. So you know your symbols are the same. And when you look back, they're both subtraction signs. You know that y squared has to be y times y. These are things you know without a doubt. Now, the 6 is the issue. Because there's 2 options for 6. You can either use 1 times 6 or you can use 2 times 3. Take a look at the middle. It's hard because if I go 6 minus 1, I could get a 5. Or if I go 3 and 2, I could get a 5. So let's just try the 1 and the 6. Let's just throw something down and give it a try. We do the outer, and that becomes a negative 1y. And we do the inner, and that becomes a negative 6y. That is not the combination I want. What if I would have put the 6 first? What if I would have put the 6 here and the 1 here? Let's see if that changes my answer. So now we do the outer, and we do the inner. And notice that still did not get me to a negative 5. So I know this is not the right option. So let's try the 2 and the 3. So in the 2 and the 3, we check our outer, that would be a negative 2. We do our inner, that would be a negative 3. There's my negative 5. So I know now I have it right. But do you see how that took me a second? Like that took me a little while to try to figure that out. Let me do one more with you before I have you practice one. Let's try 18. First of all, they're not divisible by anything. That should be your first step, is are they divisible by anything? In this case, they're not. The next thing you want to kind of do is look at your first and last, and if one of them is prime, do that first. 6 is not prime. Like over here, 1 was prime, but 3 is prime. So I could put 3H and H, sort of like 1H, because I don't have any other option. This is telling me that my symbols are the same, so when I look back, they're both plus signs. The problem now is the 6 again. Do we use 1 and 6 or do we use 2 and 3? Personally and honestly, you're just going to have to try. So if we were in class together, I would say, which one do you want to try? And let's say somebody throws out the 1 and 6. 3 times 6 is 18. 1 times 1, that's way too big. What if I were to switch the 6 and the 1? If I do my outer, that's a 3H. If I do my inner, that's a 6H. I've got 9H. So I'm getting better, but I'm still not there. So I've kind of used up this combination. So now we have to go to the 2 and the 3. But the question is where do you put the 2 and the 3? So let's say I choose to put the 3 here and the 2 here. And again, if you were with me, I would ask you, where do you want to put it? And we would just try it. And maybe we're right and maybe we're wrong. If we multiply 3 times 2, we get 6. And then we do the middle, we get 3. 6 plus 3, again, is 9. We're not quite there, but again, we're close. So let's switch the 3 and the 2. So I'm going to put the 2 here and the 3 here. And let's try it again. 3 times 3 is 9. 2 times 1. Hey, 9 plus 2 is 11. And that is what I wanted. So it takes some work. Some of you may be able to do the combinations in your head and you won't need to write these steps down. Some of you will need to write them down, okay? So it's just a matter of practice. Why don't you pause it and you need to try these on your own or you're not going to get any better. So I want you to do 19 and 20 and then we'll go back up to those negatives. So go ahead and do these two. All right, hopefully you tried it. The nice thing with 19 is the 3 on the end is prime, so that's what I would do. The bad thing is this is this goofy symbol. That's the one where they're going to alternate. So, I mean, I can just tell you because I've already worked it out. The plus goes here, the minus, the x, and then you got to deal with this 4. So the 4 is going to end up being 2 times 2. Now, I only know this because I've done this multiple times, but you might have some eraser marks just like we had over here. But let me just quick show you if I multiply this out. 2 times 3, negative 1 times 2. Do you see how I get the 4x? Again, it might take you some combinations to get that. You've just got to work it out. So if you haven't tried 20, or you did 19 wrong, pause it here and try 20. All right, 2 is prime. I know it's going to be 2m. Gosh, I keep breaking my pencil. 2m and basically 1m. I know that. This is going to be a subtraction. The only bad thing is I don't know which one goes where. So if you're just starting this, you might want to do them kind of lightly. I know the answer, so I know this is the plus and this is the minus. This 4, again, are you going to use 1 and 4 or 2 and 2? And it might take you some trials. You might go like this, and then when you work this out, you're going to realize that is not the number you need. So then you're going to have to scratch this out and try again. So the correct answer is a plus 1 and a minus 4. Because when you do your outer, you get a negative 8, and when you do your inner, you get a plus 1, and that gives you the negative 7. So you know you've done it right. All right, our last two, I apologize, we kind of skipped them, so let's circle back real quick, is numbers 15 and 16. Basically, the reason why I skipped these at first is because this negative really throws an extra twist into your problem. What I would tell you to do is I want you to get rid of this negative just like we divided out the 3. So what I'm going to do is essentially I'm going to divide by -1. Because with this negative, it makes this symbol not follow our pattern. So let's just get rid of the negative. And so this will be a positive D, and a -6. Now we can go ahead and factor this just like we would have any other problem. 2 is prime, so we know it's going to be 2D and 2D. This symbol is a negative, so they are going to alternate, so it might take you a little bit to try to figure out which one goes where. But again, just to save some time, because I know this is already getting a little long here, is I know that the minus is going to go with this one, the plus is going to go here. Then we've got to try the 6. Let me just show you, like what if I put 6 here and 1 here? If I do my outer, that would give me a 2D. And if I do my inner, that would be a -12D. That's -10. That is not what I wanted. So I don't think it's going to be the 6 and 1. So I think I would go with the 2 and 3. And I believe the answer is -3 and +2. But let me just check that to make sure. Again, I'm the teacher, and sometimes I still have to check them. That's 4D, and that's a -6D. So that would be, oh, why did I put a 2 here? This is 2, so this should be a 1. That's throwing my problem off. So maybe my other answer was right. Well, let's try it again and let's just see. Maybe I'm going to get lucky today. 2D times D, okay, that's right now. All right, that would be a 4D, and that would be a -3D, so that's a +D. Oh, there we go, we hit it. Okay, I got it now. So that 2 right there was messing me up. Remember, to get 2, it would be 2 times 1. That's why I like to check my outers and my inners, because that always tells me if I'm doing it right. Otherwise, you can make silly mistakes. So, in this mess of a problem here, that would be my answer. So there's only one to go, number 16. Please, please try this. You got to try this to get any better. Otherwise, they're going to just be harder and harder and harder each time. So pause it now. All right, if it was me, I would be pulling out this negative, and I would be going 3r squared plus 4r plus 1. Woohoo! I love it when this last symbol is a plus because it makes it so much easier. The other thing that makes this one fantastic is these are both prime numbers. So you really don't have a lot of options. So let me make sure I do this right. 3r times 1r. That gives me 3. This is a 1, so it has to be 1 times 1. That's great. This is a plus, so when I look back, they're both addition signs. So this better be right, because I really don't have any other options, but let me quick check. That would be a 3r. This would be a 1r. That's a 4r. Whew, I'm glad I got it right, because I don't know what I would switch if it was wrong. So that wraps up our second day of factoring. Yeah, it's really the second day of factoring, but it's the third day of this review.